Well, good morning, everyone. We are back on a Friday doing our recording from all of our trips and travels and conversations this week. This is Infrastructure Matters, and thank you for joining us again. I'm Camberley Bates. I'm going to be hosting today with, of course, my bestie friendsies, Krista Macomber, who you know from New Hampshire, and Steven Dickens, who you know from New York, and myself, I'm in Boulder, Colorado, which right now is snowing.
Oh, you still got snow?
A little bit of snow on the beautiful pink blossoms to the blossoming trees. So confusion abounds with all the plants.
Does that mean there's skiing still going on? Have you still got skiing? Is people still
A
getting out?
Basin will be open until probably July.
Oh,
I don't know how late they're going to stay open. The snow is not that thick this year, but yes, most of them are either this is the last weekend, where you have the big huge puddle jump thing. You ski jump over the puddle or land in the puddle, which is pretty damn freaking cold.
yeah, my daughters went skiing last weekend and they didn't do that, but watched people make a fool of themselves doing that.
So there's a few that will stay open really late, but Arapahoe Basin is up at 9,000 feet as the base. So yeah. It's a pretty cool. So we have got a really good roundup here, and lots of kind of announcements, especially coming out of the security crew and the data protection crew. And we're going to talk a little bit about sovereign cloud, what is happening there. And I'm reporting out from the NAB Show, which is National Association of Broadcast, big show that's in Vegas, which has got lots of cool toys. And also some of the gathering that we had here in Boulder with our IT and user class that we host. So stay tuned and buckle up. Here we go, guys. Okay, so let's go with Krista. Do you want to cover a couple of those big announcements that happened, like Cohesity and Commvault and Cisco?
We've had a busy week this week. It's the Krista Macomber show this week.
It really sort of has been, to be honest with you. So yeah, just to start working down the list. So Cohesity announced the completion of its Series F funding round, and it had two, little companies that kind of backed it by the tune of IBM and NVIDIA.
Just some small little names that nobody's heard of, right?
Certainly. Kind of these little no names, obviously very far from it. So I think from my perspective, I did see some coverage that the funding round was approximately $150 million. I did not see anything confirmed by Cohesity. But again, I think from my perspective, the fact that it has been, kind of backed in this round by IBM and NVIDIA, it really shows, I think, a couple of things. The first being really kind of the criticality of data when we start to think about cybersecurity and cyber resiliency, which, of course, as we've talked about on many episodes here, really are kind of strategic board level priorities. Just to kind of double click down into, each company here. So for IBM, IBM and Cohesity announced last year the creation of what they call IBM Storage Defender. And what Storage Defender is it's effectively a collection of IBM technologies and also Cohesity technologies, including Data Protect, which is Cohesity's kind of its flagship data protection platform, into a solution for cyber resiliency that is designed to sort of address the ability to protect not only kind of, your range of sources, whether it be, on-prem virtualized environments, cloud-based SaaS applications, things of that nature, but also to have capabilities like threat detection, the ability to kind of, accelerate recovery and things of that nature. So, I would say from my perspective, it really kind of shows the continued investment in that partnership from both ends. Camberley, I know you and I put our heads together on a research note for that. And you had a few comments as well, especially kind of the IBM point of view.
Yeah, so there is also some comments coming from the class, and I'll bring that up now. One of the first things we do in the class is, and who's attending there are all Fortune 100 size companies, by the way. So, and Steven would love it to say, well, yeah, they were mainframe folks as well as the open systems people. But all big companies. So one of the first things we do is we ask the students about what is top of mind in IT data centers. And 3/4 of them said, which you would love, security. Um, so security is top of mind. So it plays right into this. Is like that is the number one issue in the IT infrastructure people that we're talking to. To that, we did also talk about in this purchase, or this investment that's been made, and the significance of it. One of the things is IBM's got a very old data protection system used to be called Tivoli. It's called TSM. It's now called Protect. They need an update. So there is a migration here, which is why they've got the scale out capability of Cohesity for some of those people over time. But it's a very, very long haul to get there. Probably one of the bigger things that they're interested in is the Helios capability, which is that cloud management, which you know very well. I'll let you comment on that about what that means, and possibly bringing the investment in there. But for Cohesity, it gives them this incredible channel and this incredible support services that's worldwide in IBM. For IBM, it gives them new products that's really needed, especially since security is top of mind, and data protection is part of that suite that they need to come to the market with.
So one thing for me, looking at this from the outside, is this IBM placing a bet for an acquisition 3 years, 4 years down the track and going, this is a technology that we're going to go from strategic partnership to acquiring these guys at some point? Or am I reading between the lines and adding 2 + 2 and getting 38?
Don't know. And I'll let her comment on it as well, but they've done almost no acquisitions from the data storage people. None. In years and years and years. The last thing that was done was CleverSafe for Cause, but that was done by the cloud people. That was not done by the storage people. So while the storage we've seen the storage, there's investment in the storage, there's engineering in the storage, we have not seen them do any of that. So the answer to that is a big, huge maybe, and that maybe be because they are heavily, doubling down on cybersecurity, and that's what's needed.
Yeah, I don't see IBM Ventures that prominently. So this one kind of got my spidey sense going. IBM Ventures doubling down at Series F in a big name. Okay. Why is IBM Ventures doing that? That was just what. I mean, I don't track the space anywhere as nearly as closely as both of you do, but I was looking at it purely from is this a precursor to? They've got a technology alliance. They're now going to be on the cap sheet, the cap table. Is this something I can predict going forward? I mean, what's your view, Krista? What do you think? You watch this space more than anybody.
I would agree with Camberley's assessment. Possibly. I think the other factor at play here is, the pending acquisition that Cohesity itself is making of the data protection arm of Veritas, which would include Net Backup, and it would include the Alta SaaS data protection business. So obviously, to kind of Camberley's point regarding the additional traction within the enterprise, for example, that Cohesity is attaining through the IBM partnership, it's going to get a big boost, assuming that acquisition does go through, possibly later this year. We're kind of still obviously waiting for all the regulatory approvals and things of that nature. So that would certainly change some of the dynamics in terms of the valuation of the combined company, and things of that nature. So that would be, I would say, the big question mark for me.
So let's move on. We'll just quickly touch on Commvault's little acquisition that they had, which was honestly a little acquisition as opposed to the other.
This one was interesting. So Commvault had its sales kickoff this week, and at that event, it announced that it is acquiring a company called Appranix. And what Appranix does is it essentially does full application stack recovery for cloud-based applications. So the way we can kind of break this down and think about it is that Commvault has those capabilities around recovery of data, right? Whether that be kind of our traditional backup and operational recovery, or whether it be from sort of a DR perspective. But what Appranix brings to the table is the ability to recover that entire application stack. And in particular, the fact that Appranix focuses on cloud-hosted applications. I also saw on its website some support for Kubernetes and containerized applications as well.
So
And
it's bundling all the secrets and everything else into that recovery. Okay.
yeah, exactly. And, to that point, Camberley, what's really notable and interesting here is that that is a very complex process. So
Mm-hmm.
whether it be on-prem in the cloud, whether it be virtualized or containers, right? It's always a complicated, complex process to recover the entire application stack, but it becomes even more so in the cloud and in a Kubernetes environment for some of the reasons that you're referencing. For example, in the Kubernetes world, all of the secrets. From a cloud perspective, we have the additional abstraction that occurs, which kind of further limits the visibility into the underlying infrastructure resources, for example. So it's I really think it's a great move from Commvault, and it really supports what we've heard from them. So I attended their Shift event last fall, and similar to what we were kind of discussing with Cohesity, Commvault is also driving towards kind of a cyber resiliency, kind of strategy with its messaging and also its portfolio. So when we think about resiliency really being minimizing not only data loss, but also downtime, from my perspective, that's where Appranix really can come into play for Commvault.
Great. Cool. And then the last one, and we'll come back to the rubric one in a bit, but the Cisco piece that the Hypershield AI security.
It's the Krista show that today. There's just so much going on in your space.
Exactly.
I'm like the listeners and viewers. I'm sitting here listening. It's what's going on.
It's there has been quite a bit this week, and I'm catching up a bit on the Cisco announcement, but it announced what it calls Hypershield. And what Hypershield is Cisco's describing it as an architecture. And if I had to sort of break it down, basically what it is it's integrating artificial intelligence capabilities and observability into the network to be able to uncover vulnerabilities and then take actions like automatically applying a patch or even applying some microsegmentation within the network in order to be able to contain that threat. So a couple things kind of jumped out for me. Number one, and I know, Steven, you followed the Splunk acquisition pretty closely. So I think this is a really great example of how Cisco is going to use the Splunk technology and capabilities, especially from sort of, that observability and kind of, vulnerability assessment perspective. But also, I find it really interesting.
So do you see, just on that, just to jump
Sure.
in, do you see that as kind of one of the first product integrations? I've not tracked Hypershield. I saw it come across. I'm thinking Krista's got that one.
Sure, yeah.
I hadn't. It's interesting, you just made my spider sense go off. Is this a connection between Hypershield and what Splunk's doing from an observability point of view? Do you think it's going to be at a sort of product integration perspective?
That's sort of my understanding based on what I've seen. Again, we're still getting some of the, more technical details, but that's sort of, my understanding. And it certainly plays into the general themes of when we think about the network, obtaining that visibility and really kind of using kind of the network as the glue between applications and data and systems, and not only having that observability layer, but also in the case of Hypershield, having AI and automation to be able to automatically apply actions. And it's
makes sense perfectly.
Yeah, it's almost a little sneaky because, from my perspective, Cisco, I mean, they're still the switch company, right? I mean, that's still the heart of their business. So they are taking these adjacent steps outside of that. But I do think this is going to be another play to really make the core Cisco networking technology even more sticky in customers' environments than it already is. And maybe even kind of find some new sales opportunities from that perspective. So obviously that's been a theme as far as I've been tracking Cisco.
So I'm going to come back to we'll come back to the last one a little bit later. But
Mhm.
Stephen, you had a topic that you wanted to kind of cover, which is on the sovereign cloud, based upon some actions that have been going on in the recent months.
Yeah, so this week, Oracle announced its investment in Japan and what they're building there, all around sovereign cloud. I wrote a research note that should go live about IBM investing in its Canadian operations. And then, and I don't know what you guys are like, but I write so many research notes that I'm like, I'm sure I've covered this about AWS as well. And I did, I covered it back in January, AWS also investing in Japan. I went back and read all three research notes to write the Oracle one. There's a trend here. If three of the big five cloud providers are all investing in sovereign clouds, that's a trend for me. Two of them in Japan, one of them in Canada. You go back, you read all the press releases. It's a consistency around as the geopolitical climate becomes what it is, and we sit on the edge of whatever's going to kick off in the Middle East, and all of this type of stuff. I think regulators and governments are turning around to cloud providers and go, I just kind of like my data in our country, if that's okay, just as a hedge against what's going on from a geopolitical perspective. So I think this is good for cloud providers. I think it gives them the ability to be closer to their clients from a latency. That's a good thing just from a sort of not having to take it from a Japan point of view, across an ocean to get to another cloud provider or data center. So there's some technical latency benefits. But I think for me, sovereign clouds, we're going to continue to see just the number of cloud instances at a country level just increase. Because if you're a mid-sized sort of Western country, you're going to want to have a cloud instance. So I think the cloud providers are going to be looking to invest more and more. So I think, as I say, three research notes makes a trend. Is maybe the takeaway, but three announcements from three different cloud providers in 3 months kind of stood out for me, and that's why I wanted to flag it today.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting. Okay. I mean, it makes a world of sense with what's going on with the security side of the house, the regulations that are coming down, the need to manage if you're going to be doing anything with AI and how that AI data is stored and where it's stored and what you're doing with the
I
data
think the
platform.
regulators are starting to realise that where the data sits and where it resides as they try and regulate is important.
Yeah.
So they can then work with that cloud provider to go, if you're going to put a big cloud instance in my geography and in my sovereign territory, I'm going to help you think about how we regulate the data. So, I mean, that's not explicit, that level of sort of government oversight on what the cloud providers are doing, but that must be happening as part of the investments. I mean, these are multi-billion dollar investments. These aren't small, we're just throwing up a little data center. These are big data center build outs, multi-year commitments. You've got to be doing that with federal grants. You've got to be doing that with the regulators. So maybe they don't want to put that out and be front and center about it, but it's going to be part of the equation for sure.
So I'm going to cover a couple things. This week was the National Association of Broadcasting's big show that they host in Las Vegas. About 65,000 people were there from around the world. It's everything from cameras to satellite gear to big, huge screens that you see wherever, and all the underlying technology
I feel like I'm getting a case of FOMO here. I wished I'd known about this and gone. This sounds like proper geek
it's a
film.
great fun play. I mean, you even was like, on the upper deck of the convention center, they're going to roll in the trucks that, you see for broadcast, the news trucks and other kind of stuff. So that's another. So it's spread out all over the convention center. It's lined up by certain segments and areas that, together. So you can control the entire one area that's your specific area that you cover. And specifically, I've been there many times on the storage side, and it is a big storage show. Everything from your cloud to your tape. And it's actually, I think, is the last show for the tape providers, other than probably the supercomputing show. So, and all the tape providers are there with their fun toys that they have. So, it is a big data storage show. It's clearly, when we go to conferences like in Dell or HPE or NetApp, Pure, all of them are highlighting one or another of the big film developers that they've have some storage over there. So a couple things about them. When I talk about the kind of capabilities you have, so you have the one piece of it, which is all the rendering and the design and the animation that you're having to deliver on. Another piece is the data management for the data storage. So think of yourself as being like an at ESPN, and you need to recall immediately a snippet to have a comment. How do you do that? So that's a retrieval kind of piece of it. But you also have to have all the data management to be able to find that information. So that's a big, huge deal on there. And then the last is preservation. So think about preservation of Gone with the Wind, preservation of all those films from the 1920s, 1930s. Where is that? In some instances, they still have the fabric of the film that was done, and it's stored in special places. But we also have all this information so they can retrieve it and use it. Think about the latest Terminator film. I know I go to Terminators. The latest Terminator films is going to have little snippets of young Arnold Schwarzenegger from the original film, so they're going to have to retrieve that. So you think of how all that is all different platforms and environments for retrieving. So it's a constant change and update, and especially when we go to more high density filming, and that takes it on a logarithmic scale in terms of expanding how much we have to store. So
it's interesting, Camberley. I wrote about the Masters was last weekend. I'm a huge Masters fan. I wrote about IBM kind of and their Masters app and what they're doing, and it's interesting. I think that kind of fan experience. And I watched some of the Masters coverage on their website. You could watch multiple different holes. You could watch multiple different groups. I remember kind of watching the Masters years ago, and it was kind of like you got what the TV producer said you were going to get. You could, and you didn't have the ability to choose. Now it's the ability to curate an experience as the end user and say, "Hey, I want to watch this group play. I don't really want to watch the TV broadcast coverage, or I want to watch Amen Corner. I want to watch all the groups come through these 3 or 4 holes because that's what I'm interested in." They're capturing all this footage, but your point is it's a retrieval perspective because I'm curating my experience, not the producer of the sort of live stream, and I'm doing that on a mobile app or I'm doing it on a website. So broadcasts changed, I suppose, is my point. Thinking about it from IBM does a great job with that Masters app, and that website has done for years. They do the same for Wimbledon. They do the same for the US Open. They do those as their kind of 3 big events. It's interesting to see kind of how that fan experience has changed across all 3 of those. Just a microcosm.
It's amazing kind of industry and the challenges that they have with data they've had and how big it's gotten. So they do have a big best of show awards from the NAB awards, and there were categories there's not a storage well, there is kind of a storage category. There's an infrastructure category that includes the storage. There's a network security category. There's cameras, and there's all the other stuff that they're using there as well. But some of the award winners there were Hammerspace for their HyperNAS Best of Show Award. Quantum for their Active Scale, which is an object storage system that's been around for a long time. LucidLink and Resilio are kind of in the same space, but not quite in terms of their design. But that is being able to do global file management and use. So collaboration is really super important, because I may have somebody in Tanzania or somebody in Montana, working on maybe or maybe not the same system, and editing and doing design work. And how do you do that and allow people to live wherever they want to live? And the last one that came up that I'll call out was Seagate rolled out their new drive will be heavily used. The Hammer drive will be heavily used in this market, which is a 30 terabyte drive. It's got a lot of room to grow there. So those were congratulations to the guys.
30 terabytes on one drive. Jesus. I mean, that just... I was with storage, what was it, 10, 15 years ago, and we're 30 terabytes on one drive now. I mean, that just... Maybe I'm showing my age, but...
You are, but that's okay.
That's a genuine reaction to
because
that.
we're talking about 64 terabytes on a solid state drive, QLC drive.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
Really wild. Yeah, and we're just eating it all up. So, and I always think about how are we possibly going to use all this, but we always seem to kind of take it on. So, some congratulations to them. So I kind of want to wrap it up with this last piece of it. And I think we might have touched on this last week, but I want to bring it in, Rubric IPO. And I think for me, it's important because we're just now starting to see the IPOs happening again. It's been a while. And having something come from what I would call a real infrastructure company, that's kind of pretty darn interesting as well. That we have, that's coming of age, and probably expecting, several others to come feed through. But Krista, I know this is your space because it's cybersecurity, but I think we're all watching it to see how this one's going to play out based upon what the rest of the year is going to look like.
We are waiting patiently. We are certainly waiting patiently. And I did write a research note on this, so we can make sure to link to that in the show notes. And like you say, Camberley, it's interesting because Rubric, they have their roots in hardware. I mean, they were a hyperconverged data protection system at their start. Of course, they've been really kind of moving towards cloud and a SaaS delivered model, and really leaning into kind of security and cyber resiliency with their messaging and their capabilities. And I did take a look at least portions of the S1 filing. And so we can certainly see, there are some signs of success when it comes to kind of shifting that revenue model. I have that their subscription annual recurring revenue grew 47% year to year, which is pretty healthy, just over 784 million for their fiscal year, which ended January 31st of this year, 2024. Of course, they do have growing net losses year to year as well. I think when we talk about kind of the IPO climate, I think it's interesting because we do continue to see companies that are reporting, these net losses that are not insubstantial going IPO. But I think it really just does show, the investment that is needed for, a company like Rubric, right, to kind of make this transition. So, for example, they made an acquisition last year of a company called Laminar that plays in the data security posture management space and will help with kind of that, vulnerability identification and security story. So it's certainly not unusual to see a company, kind of post some losses. So it's, I think there certainly is pressure to raise quite a bit with the IPO. So, once it is announced and kind of, proceeds, it'll be interesting to see. But certainly just some hot takes there.
And we had discussion in the class on this. We were talking about the Rubric's pending IPO with the crew. And the questions came up, well, when is Cohesity doing this? And we said, well, probably not. They've got to absorb the stuff that's going on right now. It's going to have to move. But we also started talking about what else might be coming out. Mm-hmm. One of them that has talked about it, but they need to release some other products soon, which is VAST, which we would expect sometime in the next 12 months to happen. Mm-hmm. In that, then we went into talking about how long, like Pure Storage, Pure's been delivering, positive results now. So it's been 5 years or whatever before they turned a profit. The same thing we saw with Nutanix. But one of the things that's going on there is, especially like a Pure Storage, the pressure was get the footprints in. If I get the footprint in, I can grow it, get it bigger. But if I don't get the footprint in, I'm not going to get in there. So there is that time frame that companies that are not, that are new, that IPO, that will continue as long as they've got cash in the bank, continue to show a negative net income. But that drive is really in order to establish themselves with the accounts and spread, and then turn their sites into managing the P&L.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what we got, I think. Do we got anything else here? That's 30 minutes, folks.
Krista, is there nothing else that went on in your space this week? I mean, seriously?
Boring.
Unfortunately, I cannot take any more meetings at RSA.
Oh, so that's next week, right?
It's in 2 weeks. So we've really been getting, all the press emails and stuff like that, which is fantastic. So it's we'll have plenty to report from the show. I'm hoping to have a minute here and there to grab a coffee and, all that stuff. But it's going to be.
We need to ship you a care package in advance.
Literally, in fact, if you can make a device that distributes caffeine into the IV, that might be ideal. So
comfortable shoes to walk around,
yes.
A little sort of infusion caffeine machine. You're going to be busy.
Exactly.
I think we could almost do an entire show on RSA in a couple of weeks.
So I want to wrap the show with one last question. For all of our listeners, what is your number one strategy for managing it through a big show like this?
Yeah.
Mine is have multiple different lots of different shoes, a different one for every day.
Well, I've noticed actually that the ladies are leaning into their sneaker game. I'm going to say trainers because I'm from the UK, but I really like how the ladies have just completely foregone the high heels.
Oh.
And it's lent into.
So what's your number one strategy, though? Your strategy?
Oh, I'm comfortable shoes.
No, for managing through the show.
You just got to muscle through it. I think it's just.
I'm going to have to write down everywhere I need to be because.
Oh, I love it when a vendor curates where I'm supposed to be and is super up in my face about it. I really don't want to have to think while I'm there.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So it's.
Well, maybe that's what we'll do is we'll do our top 10 list of what we love vendors to do when we're at a show.
Oh, yeah.
That sounds like a good one.
That'd be a good roundup.
How to keep your analysts happy. All right, guys. Thank you very much. Appreciate you listening in. It's been a great week. And we'll see you next one.
See you soon.
And don't forget to like wherever the button is.
Like, subscribe, click,
subscribe,
comment,
do all those things. Yeah,
do all the things, right?